I'm Chinese and I was adopted from China at 14 months old. I grew up in Maryland with some really amazing, supportive parents that really exposed me to my Chinese heritage and background early on. So I learned the Chinese language for all of my elementary, middle school years. And I actually was fortunate enough to go to China twice. Growing up in DC and a suburb out of DC, it was really diverse. So we had diverse, places to go shopping and places to eat. And all of my friends were of a pretty diverse background. And then coming to South Florida, it was similar. It was a different type of diversity that was there, but I did go to a minority serving institution. So we were Hispanic serving, which is common for South Florida, but definitely different than where I grew up. And that was really cool to have these friends. So it didn't really occur to me that I even could have been like a minority of some kind until probably my junior year. My junior year is when I started going to scientific conferences, and these conferences were super exciting because they're a way to share science and share what you're doing with the world and have the feedback back from people from all the way from other undergrads like myself to these tenured professors that have been in the field longer than I've been alive. And that was really amazing. But unfortunately, at these conferences, I started facing just some really negative and kind of, aggressive comments from older faculty. And it was, it's just microaggressions where they don't realize they're saying these negative things about you, but they totally are, including just like mixing me up with any other Asian person that was there and then not correcting that, even though we were wearing name tags. That's why I think I'm such a big proponent of being a good mentor and sharing the resources, and why I'm a part of so many of those groups like the Apex and Polar Impact is to make sure I have that community. So when stuff like this happens, I know who to go to, or at least who to talk to. And I know that one day it'll get better. So at an early age, I always loved Antarctica. I grew up watching movies like Happy Feet and eventually the movie March of the Penguins, which was really cool since that was basically just real life Happy Feet. And that eventually led me to intern at the National Aquarium, which is in Baltimore, Maryland, which eventually led me to sunny South Florida, uh, in the United States, where I triple majored in marine biology, environmental science, and biology. I ended up triple majoring, which is a bit of an unusual path for most undergrads, as I had the amazing experiences of marine bio to do some research and things in the Florida Keys. I added environmental science because I wanted to look at the other environments that help influence those marine environments, including the largest wetland in North America, the Florida Everglades, where I could do a two-chapter honors thesis. And I added the biology major since I wanted to incorporate the lab components to my marine bio work later on. And during this time in undergrad, I actually was really fortunate to get a NOAA EPP MSI scholarship, or Education Partnership Program for Minority Serving Institutions. And this allowed me to work at two NOAA science labs. My first was with Office of Aquaculture, which was more of a social science and science communication. And then the second one was with NOAA's Antarctic Ecosystem Research Division. And that's where I really got into working with Antarctica. And I worked with NOAA's only seabird scientist in the polar regions, Dr. Jefferson Hinkey. And that's what truly motivated me to pursue this for my graduate studies. Life at CU is definitely a lot different than life in Florida. It's definitely colder, but it's really fun. My department, which is the Environmental Studies department here, is really interdisciplinary. So people in my cohort study completely different things than I do, and it's been really fun getting to know them and learning about their interests. I also take a lot of classes within like the geology and atmospheric science department, since we don't really have a marine bio specific department here. And I feel like I'm learning like the other side of oceanography, since I really did learn about the more higher trophic level bio-oceanography in undergrad. It's been a lot of fun living in Boulder. I'm trying a lot of new sports. I didn't really visit Colorado before now. So I'm doing a lot new like outdoor sports like hiking and skiing, and the mountains in the Front Range are beautiful. However, I do sometimes feel maybe a little bit like a fish out of water, just being a marine biologist in a landlocked state. But I have some really cool uh, lab mates, and my advisor is really helpful, and she's encouraging me to apply for some research experience on research vessels. So hopefully that will bring me back out into the ocean. So, part of my PhD project, I'm really fortunate to be working alongside my colleague Haley. And together, we've been able to combat some really cool things already just within the first semester of our PhDs together. Haley will mostly be focusing on the stable isotope analysis of these otoliths, since that's their background in biochemistry, and I'm looking more at the trace metal analysis. However, part of our entire PhD research is to not only just do research, but to share it with the public. And what we did one day on main campus at the University of Colorado is we walked around with a fish costume and we just started interviewing students on campus. And yeah, Haley would go up to people and we'd start with questions like, do you know where Antarctica is? And surprisingly, the average majority of the undergrad class here did not. They would point up and be like, oh, that's the North Pole. A couple of them got the South Pole. We definitely realized that the community of Boulder probably should learn a little bit more about Antarctica. So in March, we're hoping to do a little CU Family Fest, which is going to be just one weekend where all of the labs come and show their different outreach. And because we're part of an NSF grant, we got to have some NSF different types of advertisement, but also educational brochures to explain Antarctic animals and the ecosystem. And we're hoping to share what our lab does to the community. So that was actually my third NOAA internship. This one was with NOAA Office of Research, so just a different department than the NOAA Fisheries offices I had worked with before. And I was aboard the NOAA ship, the Okinawa's Explorer, and this was during and I was part of the Explorer in Training internship. And what we did is we sailed in June from Dutch Harbor, Alaska to Kodiak, Alaska. Dutch Harbor is in the far west Aleutian Islands. It's where Deadliest Catch was filmed, if you guys have ever watched that TV show. And then Kodiak is known for the really big brown bears that we can see on Nat Geo sometimes. And it took me 3 flights to get from Miami, which is the most like southeast United States you can go, up to the Aleutians, which is one of the most northwest places you can go. And there was some travel delays, but I eventually made it up there. And the ship is equipped with a multi-beam sonar radar. So basically, my job and the whole ship's mission was to map the seafloor during these 3 weeks. It was really cool because I never really mapped the seafloor nor knew any of the equipment and components about that. And it was also my very first research vessel experience. So this was really fun and it was in a beautiful place. It should be noted that I am a seasick marine biologist, which is a bit unfortunate considering my career. So crossing the Bering Strait was definitely a bit interesting. Early into our cruise, since that's when we crossed the Bering Strait, I was still adapting to life at sea, and maybe my seasick patches hadn't kicked in, but I got incredibly seasick for like a whole 24-hour period. And I had to go to the dock on the ship, and they didn't have like a ton of medical things. And I don't really think there's much to solve that when you're super seasick. So he just had me eating super raw ginger in hot water. And that actually did end up working and eventually gave me a Benadryl so I could fall asleep. Um, that was definitely not super fun. And actually, enough of us got sick that the captain had to completely redirect our cruise line, so we weren't going against the swell while we were ship driving. Um, so that was good because it was a good experience, and it also taught us that, research can be very much adaptable, especially when we're on, boats. And I thought though overall it was super fun. This was my first time seeing like otters and puffins in the wild, and the crew itself was super friendly, and we even got to explore the ports after the cruise was over. So I currently am in the Cassandra Brooks lab here at CU, and we study polar marine science. So I'm really looking at the Antarctic toothfish, which is a super large fish that resides in the Southern Ocean, which surrounds Antarctica. They're super long-lived and they can be up to 160 kilograms. And what we're doing with this toothfish is we're using their otoliths, which is the little ear bone that all fish have that's made out of calcium carbonate. And we can discover a lot of life history traits from them. So the reason why this is so important about this fish is that they're located in the Southern Ocean, and it's one of the fastest changing environments with response to climate change, which allows a lot of species to be superbly adapted. Toothfish actually have antifreeze glycoprotein, so that's why they're able to dive super deep in these Antarctic waters. And yet these fish are also a subject to changes in ecosystems, which of course is happening now with climate change. I'm mainly going to be looking at the Ross Sea to begin with, which is known as the last ocean or the last intact marine ecosystem. And it's actually now a marine protected area, the world's largest, which has over 2 million kilometers that's protected from fishing and other extractive industries. So using these otoliths, we're able to look at things like stable isotope chemistry and trace metal analysis, as well as just other microchemistries within this ear bone. And it can tell us a lot about how these populations could be moving or migrating around the continent, as well as how the fishing industry is affecting these fish. Because unfortunately, these fish are a lucrative fishing industry and they're actually being resold as Chilean sea bass, which is unfortunate because they're neither Chilean nor bass. And this is very popular in US and EU markets. It's one of the easiest fish to cook. It's become a lot more expensive, so it's kind of considered a delicacy in some fancier seafood restaurants. And we're really hoping to show that the MPA is hoping to help these populations, but also to understand the fish stock assessments and how they might need to be adjusted as we look at these different populations using the otolith chemistry. So the polar science community is really incredible. They're very welcoming and inspiring. I'm part of several groups to be involved with the early career part of the polar community, including PSECA, which is the Polar Science Early Career Community Office. There's Polar Impact, which is a network for minorities in polar fields. And I'm also on the APEX, which is the Association for Polar Early Career Scientists. There's a lot of acronyms here at the international project group level. And through this appointment, I'm part of the DEI or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion project group. And through this, I was able to learn some of the initiatives we're working towards with involving other early career scientists from all around the world. And I actually just got appointed the Apex and SCAR representative. And SCAR is the scientific Committee for Antarctic Research, and they're the main governing body that influences the Antarctic Treaty System and how we can move forward and make decisions that happens in Antarctica. So this is a really cool experience because Apex is more of the early career stage and SCAR is definitely the later career stage, but both are involved with science and plenty of other disciplines that are involved in Antarctic research. And what I'm hoping to do is just incorporate some diversity, equity, and inclusion, just ideas, and to really just share ideas and initiatives and to increase the collaboration between the two groups. We've hosted two DEI workshops between these, which has been really helpful, especially because these workshops have been catered towards life in the polar field. So it might include remote field work or being in a field where it's mostly male dominated and how we can be good allies and have bystander intervention to help our peers. We've also talked about including the translation of many documents, since we understand that the Polar Field and Science Committee is mainly Western dominated, and that needs to change. So by now translating some of our most prestigious scholarships and fellowships and having that be incorporated to other languages where we now have people that can provide that translation, we're hoping to open it up to many other countries that may have been underrepresented in the polar fields. And I actually have future plans with this group, as in August of this year, we're going to be going to Chile, and it's the SCAR Open Conference or Open Science Conference. And I'm going to be co-convening my first session there. It's the very first EDI session in SCAR. So this is really going to bring forth some ideas about what people are doing to help increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and maybe some of the barriers that they faced along the way. It's a parallel section and it is international, so we're hoping to get a really good global perspective and also to just investigate the greatest questions in our field that can have a global impact. In order to do this, we want to make sure that the whole Antarctic research community is going to be continuing towards improved awareness and identifying effective ways to move forward to build this community so it can be more inclusive overall. If you asked me for the last 4 to 6 years, my aspirations were always to be a professor. I think that was mainly because I really wanted to stay within academia. I started a PhD about a month and a half after I graduated undergrad, so definitely academia was very heavy on my mind. However, during my NOAA internships, I realized that there's a lot more to the professional world besides just academia. And I really like the way that the other sections, including government and nonprofits, really do have an influence on policy. Also, through these NOAA internships, I'm really fortunate to have received direct hire, which means that whenever I graduate within 2 years, I can apply for a job within the federal government and not have to go through USA Jobs, which is a very tedious task and website and is honestly the main hurdle for why many people can't get within the federal government. So I'm really thinking about possibly utilizing that when I'm done with my PhD. But if I had a dream job, I think it would be to work at a NOAA fisheries lab where I can do the science and partake in the science, but also influence the policy that comes from the science and have a side job being a guest lecturer or being on people's committees at grad schools. That's what my other NOAA mentor did, and that was really inspirational. And it's something that I hope to do since it will kind of combine all of the interests that I'm doing and hopefully just pave a way for future generations. This is an advice I got a lot from my current advisor, but it resonated with me so well, and I've already given it to multiple people I've met. But it's to find your superpower. So, not all of us are going to be amazing at grant writing, and not all of us are going to be great at public speaking or even data analysis, and that's completely okay. We want to find what we're good at and especially what you're passionate about. The whole reason I got to where I am today and what I hope to do in the future is because of my passion. I knew this is something that I wake up doing and that I'm excited to do, and it's something I know that will affect people who are also interested, and that really fuels me. So I kind of want to see what people are inspired by and to then go from there. And I feel like social media and talking to some senior scientists might dissuade them from that, but it's really important to know what you're good at and what makes you happy every day, because that's what's going to get you to actually change the world. And just that science works better together, not separately. The polar science field is really good about being so inclusive just because we're such a small field. But I've seen in other fields of marine bio that it can be a little bit gatekeepy, and that's really important to know that there's no reason we need to do that. We are all on the same team. We are all working together. And we should be leaning on the colleagues and the networks that we make and to use those superpowers that you have to actually make some change in the world and to never forget that you're not ever done learning. I feel like some tenured people may forget this, but this is incredibly important. And if you have that mindset for the rest of your life, you're going to learn some really cool things.